Thank you very much. Efaristo? Okay, Kalimera. That's easier. Kalimera. Yeah, you are so encouraging. Thank you. Very gracious and kind. Professor, thank you so much for introducing Rwanda. Dr. Mukwege is a real hero of mine, too. I visited his hospital there in the Congo, and the work he does with the women, astounding. So inspiring. And so, yeah, and Radio Milcolino, we have to have a conversation afterwards. I am really grateful to be here. My wife and I are so grateful it's our first time to come to Greece. And the federation of the team that met us from the Johannes at the airport, and everybody has just given us such wonderful hospitality. We will be going home tomorrow with many warm memories. We learned a lot. This conference, oh my goodness, talk about education. So I want to begin this morning. Yeah, that's true. Get that away from the laptop. Thank you. Good thinking. I want to begin this morning just looking at Rwanda, this beautiful little country. It's really hard to change a reputation. Okay, wait a minute. It's not hard to change a good reputation. A couple of stupid choices. Hard to change a bad reputation. And Rwanda has this horrible for many people. If they know anything, they think genocide. So a little homework at the beginning here. If you search Rwanda Vimeo, and you just type that in your search this evening, you'll see a little 8-minute video that will come up. Beautiful video of the country of Rwanda. Rwanda is so much more than genocide. And I think we've heard those kind of phrases before. We're so much more than our worst choices, our worst actions. And so I wanted to begin with just the beauty of Rwanda, this gorgeous little country in the center, just below the equator. And I'll keep moving forward here. If I where did I put my glasses? There's the arrow key. Good. I want to tell you a story. I'm a big believer that if you want anything to go home, you need to wrap it in a story. And I am hoping some gifts from Rwanda's stories will go home with you today. So the story I want to begin is a colleague of mine, Gasikwa. Gasikwa and Dawson, two Rwandan men that I worked with during the genocide. We'll refer to both of them, but particularly I wanted to introduce you to Gasikwa. Gasikwa was of the majority group, and his wife was of the minority group. Happened all the time in Rwanda. I would say there's plenty of evidence to suggest that the genocide in Rwanda was not about Hutus who hated Tutsis, or vice versa. It was a politically motivated, a politically driven, political efforts to hang on to power and to divide people. Ever heard of anything like that? Polarization? Oh my goodness. And when Gasikwa got that message, you were to kill your neighbor, which his wife, there's no way that he would ever do that. In fact, instead of killing people, his neighbors brought their families to him to protect. The local government guy said Gasikwa, he also was of the majority. The government guy, Hutu, his wife, minority, Tutsi. Gasikwa, I don't think I can protect my wife and children. Will you? And Gasikwa's not armed with guns. Gasikwa didn't have the privilege that I and my wife had as foreigners, but he had a lifetime of integrity. What you believe and what you do, matching. And when they came to kill the people, more than 40 people in his house, the first thing he saw was not an enemy. He fired pathways in his brain that said, neighbor. Bernard, one of these men with clubs. Bernard, your daughters must be hungry. Here, would you like some chickens? And with acts of kindness, he triggered pathways in their brain that changed. That radio you were talking about had like sent metaphorical bricks through the radio waves, messages against the Tutsi. And people would catch this brick, this message about the other, and they would decide, what do I do with this message? You know? Gasikwa threw the bricks away. Others began to build a wall between them and the Tutsi, until soon they could not see the human, they could not see their neighbor. They saw a wall with a sign that said enemy. And imagine with me, my friend Gasikwa, with 2 chickens in his hands, busting through that metaphorical wall, and all of a sudden the neighbors see the human again. I would put forth to you that Gasikwa's acts of kindness accessed neural pathways in the brains of men who were ready to kill that no other act would have accessed. Had he come at them with shame and guilt and what's wrong with you, I don't think it would have been that same outcome. But instead he says, Bernard, your daughters must be hungry. Here, take some chickens. It won't be the perfect answer, but it will give life for several more weeks for some of those people. You see, I'm going to try to just be brief here with my history. And what I'm going to be giving you today, this is just the beginning of a conversation, okay? What I put up here is not the end of the conversation. This is a conversation in process. So you'll see there's a lot of things left out. Good, we can fill them in a conversation. But the late 1800s, we have the Germans in Rwanda, and after World War I, we have the Belgians, both of them practicing eugenics. In America, we're practicing eugenics. This idea of selective breeding, and it's just horrifying when you look at this and the potential, how it polarizes people, us and them, somebody superior, somebody inferior. And so back to our story of Rwanda, we have a small group called Twa who are often pushed to the side. We have another group called Tutsi, typically cattle people. But the Tutsi and the Hutu, they married each other all the time. There's much more evidence to show that these two groups of people loved each other than to show that they hated each other. The evidence of hate is always there too. When you're looking for it, you can find it. But there was plenty of evidence of love. So this is going to be a story of political manipulation to break bonds. To pull off a genocide is not easy. It is not something that just happens. There's nothing spontaneous wired inside of us for genocide. It's something that must be designed and built and cultivated. And back in the Belgians, I'm not going to put it all at their doorstep, but they too had a role with the ID cards that included Hutu, Tutsi, Twa, naturalized. And so 1960, independence comes. Instead of saying we're going to have a Rwanda for everybody, a small group again, a politician said, no, Hutu power, it's our turn. You Tutsis, you got the privilege from the Belgians. That's those seeds of discrimination, a culture of us and them thinking was fertilized, was nurtured, was watered by this idea of us and them and the ID cards and those things. So when independence comes, many of the Tutsis are targeted as the enemy. Many are killed, many flee to neighboring countries, thinking they'll come back home, when things settle down, 10, 20 years, no. 30 years later, they'll get military training, these refugees, and they'll be called the Rwandan Patriotic Front, RPF, the Rwandan Patriot, and there'll be 3 years of war. Finally, we'll get everybody to lay their guns down, and we think we're going to have peace, but a small group of men and women. The plane will be shot down carrying the president, and a small group of men and women will launch this genocide, saying we should have killed all the Tutsis back at the time of independence. If we would have killed them all then, we wouldn't be dealing. Now all of them, mother, babies, children, go in the court, destroy the birth certificates, wedding certificates, any evidence they ever existed. And it's all planned by a small group of men and women. Small group of men and women who will be at the core of killing more than 1 million innocent families, both Tutsi and some like Gasikwa who survived, but others like Gasikwa who stood up against them, Hutus who stood up. There weren't many. If there were many Hutus who would have stood up against it, the genocide could have been stopped. But some of those who did stand up paid for it with their lives. More than 1 million people killed, organized, designed, executed by a small group of men and women. You see, I want today to share with you how I talk about genocide over dinner. I know it might not seem like an easy thing, huh? I mean, here at this conference, yeah, that's all you do is talk about it over dinner. But in normal life, here's my reason. My thinking is that for us to prevent genocide, it takes the common people's will. It takes leadership, as without a doubt, and leadership leads, but people can be led to horrible actions or people can be led to courageous actions, selfless, sacrificial actions. And so I talk about genocide and these things in very simple day-to-day terms. Like genocide comes from thinking. I don't even want to say the last part. You see, every time I say, my world would be better without you in it, I'm strengthening a pathway in my brain that I am trying to remove. It's not that I want to kill anybody, but sometimes I think, oh, it'd be so much easier if I didn't have to deal with this person. That kind of thinking. My world would be better without you in it. I've got three concepts I want to talk with you about, and then we'll share about talking about the genocide. How do we talk about the genocide at the dinner table? I mean, ordinary people, you can't prevent genocide like preparing for a hurricane. Preventing genocide isn't the work of a day, a month, a week, even a year. It's the work of lifetimes. Lifetimes of changing the way we think from harm to health. Some of you may you who've dug in deep, Irvin Staub and his continuum of violence, very powerful material. But around the dinner table, I just talk about a pathway to harm and a pathway to healing. Meritum, we were talking about healing. I want to change this. I want to say a pathway to health. This is an ongoing conversation. A pathway to health, pathway to harm, which is often defined by polarization. I don't know when our country in America has been more polarized. A pathway to harm defined by polarization, or a pathway to health defined by restoration. And in Rwanda's case, restorative justice, because we can't have restoration without justice. And so this restorative, one concept I want to share with you. Concept number 2 is about values. How are we going to carry on these journeys? How are we going to get off the pathway to harm and on the pathway to health without clearly identifying our core values? And these are 3 values that I have chosen there. First off, little explanation how the world works, in case you're wondering. This is how I think the world works. Everybody wants purpose and everybody wants community. So when I can offer purpose and I can offer community, I've got power in this world. And to keep purpose and community in healthy relationship, I love to talk about respect. An environment of respect where we can learn each other's stories. And as we learn each other's stories, empathy begins to grow. And we're like, really? That was your grandfather? Oh, wow. And I think about my grandfather. And the connections begin to be made that we are one family. We are one race, a human race. And then inclusion becomes very natural. It's desirable. We're part of the family. Hey, you're part of the family. Come to my house. Come have dinner. We have wonderful sunsets at my house. And so this idea of core values, super important to conversations I'm going to have about preventing genocide. The last tool I want to talk to you about is critical thinking. And we often talk about choices and the importance of choices, but lately I've been going deeper trying to understand this idea of neural pathways. I want you to think about my friend Gasikwa for a moment, okay? Gasikwa sees the people coming to his house to kill the people in his house. The pathways in his brain that fire are not enemy pathways, they are neighbor pathways. And those neighbor pathways fire other pathways in his brain that say, your daughters, you're a father. Your daughters must be hungry. The idea of understanding, excuse me a second. How we form the neural pathways and how often we fire those pathways. Do we fire pathways of polarization, or do we fire pathways of restoration? And the more pathways I fire of polarization, the easier it is for the next one to fire, and the next one, and the next one. Whereas when I fire pathways of restoration, they say the coating on the pathway is called myelin sheath, like the sheet of, like my sleeve on my coat. Every time I fire that pathway, it gets quicker, faster. It becomes more of who I am. It begins to define me. So these 3 tools These three concepts we're going to look at the core, the idea of values, our words and our actions on a pathway to health or a pathway to harm, and critical thinking, the pathways we fire in terms of how we live our life. My wife and I moved to Rwanda in 1990 with our children, okay? 6 months before the war began. We went there to build schools, to operate clinics. We were working with the aid organization ADRA. We were there for 4 years before the genocide, 4 years to build relationships, 4 years to fall in love with the country and the people of Rwanda. Just weeks before the genocide, this picture was taken. My mother and father were visiting. Family, legacy, the most important thing I have in my life, family. I had no idea when we took this picture that in a couple of weeks, genocide would explode, and I would be asking my father to take my wife and children to safety, and I was going to stay. Now, this is a tough one. Am I probably at the 20-minute mark? Okay, no, don't look at your clock, forget it. And so our family had grown in Rwanda. A young lady came and lived in our house, worked in our home. She loved our kids. A young man came in the evening as the watchman. They both had Tutsi ID cards. And when all the government said, we got to get out of here, we have to evacuate, they killed 10 Belgian UN soldiers. We've all got to leave. Don't bring any Rwandans with you in your car. So in effect, they were asking my wife and I to leave part of our family behind. Now, I know we're conscious of time, but I want you to meet my wife. When we made the mic not switched on, I don't make a difference. Thank you very much. When we made the decision that I would stay, this was not me telling my wife something. This was both of us deciding something together. People often focus on me because I stayed. Much harder for Teresa. Her courage, you know, she looks the same as she did 25 years ago. I'm this old gray-haired guy. Her courage, her support, she never once said, Carl, what about me and the kids? She didn't try to put me in a position of choosing because she too saw it as family. And we both decided we could maybe use this privilege that the Rwandans had given us and maybe help save the lives of people while she would take our kids to safety. So much more I'd like to tell her, but thank you, doll. When we said goodbye, we had no idea that nearly 1 million people would be killed. We had no idea that it would go on for 3 months. We thought maybe 2 weeks. I wasn't alone. People often said, did you feel alone? You know, you were the only American. Well, there were 10 other Europeans who stayed. And we can get into more of those stories. I made tapes to my wife and children during the genocide. In case I didn't survive, I wanted them to have stories. And so I finally put those stories into a little book. And we've got some, I was going to go to a school and that didn't work out, so I have a few extra copies. But the stories are there. But where I want to go today is I wasn't alone. Not only did I have the young man and the young lady, but a Rwandan pastor and his wife came to my home. They had Hutu ID cards. They were not marked to be killed, but they chose to come to my house. She would be the one who would help us get food. When the killing squad would come to the gate, she would talk to them like a mother. She would diffuse the situation. He was like this deep well of counsel. He knew the history, he knew the culture, he knew the people, he knew the language. By the way, Rwandans, they only speak one language. There's no Hutu language, Tutsi language. They speak one language. They go to church together, they drink beer together, they do everything together. He will be my counselor, my source of wisdom and advice, and he'll say to me, I'll say, Pastor, I'm so happy these two people are still alive. We were stuck in our house for 3 weeks without leaving the house. I'm so happy they're alive, but there's got to be more. And he'll say to me, Carl, if you're going to do anything outside, anything in the middle of a genocide, you've got to build a relationship with the people in power. And so I will go and I will meet the colonel in charge of the city. And we will become, I hate to say the word friends, but a form of friendship will begin to build between the two of us. He's in prison today for his role in the genocide and the rape and the torture and the things that he orchestrated. But during that time, he became also one of my most powerful allies. He will give me a travel permit. The Rwandan genocide is built on obedience to authority. And you will see, I will go through roadblocks. He'll send me to several orphanages. Damas will have 80 children, but by the time the genocide is over, there'll be more than 400 children. When I come first to his genocide, to his orphanage, I will find little graves in the parking lot, children who are dying from diarrhea. All they need is water. And so Gasikwa and Dawson and I, we will start bringing water and food and medicine to 3 groups of orphans around the city. We will start building a network with people who are committing genocide. But when we encounter them, I'm buying powdered milk. Well, they probably stole it, but I'm buying powdered milk from them. We're building a network trying to supply these 3 orphanages. And we'll end the story of 94 here because I want to tell you my last story about Rwanda today. But those rebel soldiers, those refugees who fled at the time of independence, they got their training, the Rwandan Patriotic Front. They are the ones who will end the genocide, not the international community. Rwandans will start the genocide. Rwandans will end the genocide. Those refugee soldiers will drive the extremists out of power, out of the country, and it will be their job to set up a new government. I have the privilege of going back to Rwanda many times, several times a year. This was a group of teachers that I took back. FTG, we're always about finding the good. You can be overwhelmed by the horror when you study these things. So every day we're forming pathways, finding the good, finding the good. And the story I want to share with you is this last summer, I met Maria. Maria is the survivor of the genocide. She and 3 daughters survived. She's a year younger than me. So she was a 35-year-old mom who survived with her daughters. Filbert is a family friend. Filbert, his ID card before said Hutu. But Maria will just go on and on about how Filbert has helped their family after the genocide. In fact, she asked Filbert to be the MC at her daughter's wedding not so long ago. Now, Filbert doesn't just help her with the garden. She says Filbert has helped her get free of anger and bitterness. And I'm like, wow, whoa. How? Well, the first thing Filbert did to help her was he helped her find where her husband and sons were buried. Now, this part of the story, I don't know how to tell. Because it's very hard to believe. You see, I tried telling you the story starting with Filbert as a family friend. But Filbert knew where her husband and sons were buried because he was in the gang who killed them. And he confessed. Let me just tell you a little bit about Filbert here, the little bit I know. Filbert was 19 years old at the time of the genocide. Filbert confessed to his role in the genocide. Rwanda said in their restorative justice program, pick 7 people you trust in the community. It's a program called Gachacha. Pick 7 people you trust, and they gave them those nice banners. These are people of integrity. After the genocide, we are focusing on integrity. We're focusing on unity. And these people will facilitate confessions. Every Thursday afternoon, no school, no businesses, go to the soccer field, football. I don't know what you call it in Greece. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. Go to the soccer field, and men will confess. Filbert was one of the men who confessed. People began to learn the truth. People have to know the truth in this restorative pathway backwards. Filbert will go on to work in a camp. I call them Reinvent Yourself camp. He will be helping to build build roads, build homes for widows. This is a group of 200 men and women who are talking to some high school kids I brought, who are rebuilding. This prison, you can't really call it a prison camp. There's no fence, there's no wall. The guards don't have guns. On the weekend, these people, if they choose, they'll go to church. Imagine being in church and one of these people walks in. You're in the middle of singing, and all of a sudden the singing gets quieter and quieter as everybody looks. They're firing pathways in their brain. Somebody who committed genocide, they just walked into church. Boom, they fire that pathway. And then this person starts to sing, and they've got a really good voice. And you're like, whoa, I could start to form a little pathway. This person has forget that, they're a killer. And you begin to understand the journey of the people of Rwanda. As they are living together, Filbert and Maria will be actually building houses together. And she'll tell you it was very hard to be around him. He will tell you, I tried to go to the water source the long way so I didn't have to face her. But the government of Rwanda was setting up opportunities for people to have shared experiences and form new pathways in their brain. And over the weeks and the months and the years, Maria began to form new pathways in her brain. Maria is incredibly inspiring to me. I don't know. I said Maria. You see, she didn't tell. When she told us that Filbert had killed her husband and sons, and later she told us that she invited him to the wedding to be the MC, I'm like, no, Maria, the wedding is family time. Why'd you invite him? Wasn't your family upset? Yeah, she said. She said, and his family was upset when he asked my daughter to be the godmother of his children. You see, Maria and Filbert, over years, have been building new pathways, and they are giving me hope that it's possible. Maria has reframed so much. She's reframed who she is. She's reframed who Filbert is. She's reframing who her country is. This idea of reframing, super exciting to me. So, if you go along with Erica Chenoweth, she says we don't have to change the whole world. We just have to change a small group. And this idea, well, for Teresa and I, this trip to Greece, from the Acropolis to the genocide of the Pontian Greeks, to your hospitality today, the conversation is going on. Do I walk down a pathway? Do I say words? Do I commit actions of harm? Because preventing genocide has to start with me, my reflection. Or do I choose words and pathways of health? Those are the choices I have, and I've learned a lot from you in these days. And I thank you very, very much.